So please make a habit of saving your models from week to week so that you have an archive and a backup. I have saved my model from last week, and also because I'm not going to be needing a lot of the past history that I was using, I cleared out a lot of elements. I'm really down to just the layers that I used for my extruded model. And if we peek at it in perspective, you'll see this is really all I have left right now of my file. So we're going to do a couple of things. Right now we've been always working in our model space at a full scale, but we are going to change the units. When we translate this and scale it up to a much larger size, working in inches will not make any sense. So let's begin by going to our file and our settings and changing the units. So I've selected units. For my model, instead of inches, I'm going to want feet. And I'm going to go ahead and choose to scale this object so that I know that my object remains the same size. If I didn't scale it, my object would change from being 8 inches tall to being 8 feet tall, which would be okay, but in this case, just for good practice, let's go ahead and scale it. For the layout, changing to feet, and again, I will accept the scale change. So now if I go to check the dimensions of my object, again with my drafting tools, you'll see now that my model is 0.66. So since I'm in feet, it's 2/3 of a foot, which is 8 inches. So my object scaled and stayed at the correct size. So let's go ahead and save just for good practice. The second thing I'm going to want you to do is now change the size. We've been thinking of this object as an 8-inch object, but we're going to begin to think of this object as a site. And so instead of 8 inches for the side dimension, I'm going to want that to be 300 feet. There's several ways to do this, but I'm going to just use the simple scale command. And I don't want the 1D or 2D. I want it to scale in all directions, so that's just simple scale. I'm going to select my objects, hit enter. For my base point, I'm just going to go ahead and click on the corner of this. And for my second point, I'm going to click on the other corner. Okay, now it's waiting for me to do something. Let's type in a number. Since we're in the units of feet, I'm going to type in 300 and hit enter. If everything has gone well, that object, which was once 8 inches, should now be 300 feet. Let's check. So I think maybe in my scaling, I may have picked, slightly off from either my object or maybe my object is twisted a little bit. But as long as I'm in the range, that's pretty darn close. That's going to be fine. Yours may come out precisely. Mine may be registering this, tiny little drag here. But either way, I want you to have a model which is close to 300 feet. That's the first step. And you'll see that my grid settings, the grid that I had set up when I was working on a much smaller model, is insufficient. Particularly if you're working with the grid a lot, go ahead and increase the grid units. If I want to take that step and increase the grid, it's in the same place under my file, my settings, and then if I go to my grid, you can see that my grid is very tight because I was working on a small object. I'm just going to say, give me a grid every 1 foot, major lines every 10 minor grid lines. So every 10 feet I'll have a major line, and if I have a 500 count grid, now I'm sort of back with a grid describing the space where my model lives.